This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 26th of January 2021, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am Miss K. Again, in case you missed today's headlines, here they are. Daily Nation, inside Yatani's 3.02 trillion shilling budget. The Standard, you owe me a debt. And The Star, Kenyatta plans Sagana Forum to tame Ruto wave. I'd say we begin with The Standard, where Raila Odinga took to Kameme TV to tell Mount Kenya region that they owe him a political debt.
Yes.
He recalled how he stood with Kibaki in the poll that ended KANU's rule, even after Kibaki was involved in a serious accident. And he also gave a history of his family's relationship with the Gema Nation over the last 58 years. He recalls how his father declined the chance to form the first African government, instead demanding that Jomo Kenyatta be released as a condition for Kenya's freedom. He also quoted the betrayal by Kibaki's men in the year of our Lord when he said that they had come up with an MOU that provided for the creation of a powerful position of prime minister. And once they got to power, they reneged on this position that he was meant to occupy. It stated here that his remarks of the politics of debt is likely to trigger a fresh debate on more debt that the Gema Nation owes to Deputy President William Ruto, who is also hoping for the support and the backing of Gema for his support of Uhuru in 2013 and 2017. A rebuttal was given by Senate Majority Whip Irungu Kang'ata and Nyeri Town MP Gojiri Wambugu. They dismissed Raila's debt narrative to the community. In fact, Kang'ata said that agreements entered in a boardroom cannot be used to rally a community to back an individual's presidential quest. He said that only agreements that were publicized and engaged the voters should be honored. He said that there's a criteria for binding political agreements, which is a political agreement has to have a political offer and acceptance and needs to be politicized by way of public discourse and endorsement of its terms.
Really?
Yes.
I couldn't agree more with Raila. The Odinga family has always been a family of kingmakers, and they've succeeded at that. His father, as you said, Mrs. K, made, to some extent, Jomo president, gave him the numbers that he needed to form a winning coalition to form that government. And so did Raila in 2002. And so I think it's only fair that we return the favor. And he's also a really uniting factor, a credible leader that I think the entire Gema Nation and the entire country can rally behind.
Yes, I agree.
We have a three-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines for you. We ask ourselves three questions. Is this headline topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? Does Gema really owe him a debt?
But wait, Miss K, I thought you were about to give us a contract lesson. What happened?
Oh yes, I did forget.
Topical.
Well, it is topical, and I'd have to say this to Senate Majority Whip Irungu Kang'ata. This is not a legal agreement where you need an offer, acceptance, consideration, and a requirement to make it binding or legal. This is a political agreement, and there are things that might not be said out in the public, but as gentlemen's agreement, we must hold true to.
Yeah, I think as Kenyans, we're very fickle. And I don't think that the irony of his statements, have dawned on him, right? I think that even there was some novelty in electing Uhuru Kenyatta, don't you think? I mean, the son of Jomo Kenyatta. And these are, kind of fallen within the realm of promises, just because it wasn't taken out into the public scene. I don't know. I think he's trying to find an argument and he's pulling at strings.
I agree. I think we put that in the parking bay for now, and we look at the Star. Sagana.
Yes. So Kenyatta plans Sagana Forum to tame Ruto wave. And in the Star, we're told that President Uhuru Kenyatta has convened a crucial meeting to take place in Sagana over the weekend. He's going to assemble the leaders, political leaders in the Mount Kenya region, presumably to discuss BBI, to also discuss other developmental concerns that the people of the mountain have. And this forum is being done in the context of the disquiet that's been happening regarding BBI in central Kenya, in the context of the Irungu Kang'ata letter of about 3 weeks ago, where he was saying there's very little support for BBI across the region. And so we're told that this will significantly dent and even perhaps throw off Ruto's campaign against BBI.
I think this is fantastic. I think it's about time the president goes down to his voter base, talks to the people, and, you know, spreads the message. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions about what BBI actually represents. So who better than to, you know, explain and justify and sell it than the president himself?
Absolutely. And, you know, if you take Central Kenya away from the Central Kenya base, away from William Ruto, then his candidature for 2022, I think, collapses just like that.
Like
and that's what's going to start happening.
Yes, I do agree. I would say we put that in the parking bay as well.
No, toss it.
You want us to toss it?
Why are we wasting time?
All right.
Very wordy, but topical. But topical.
Yes,
topical. And the issue at hand is very, very, very important. But tossed. On to the final headline, The Nation.
Daily Nation, inside Yatani's 3 trillion shilling budget. So the Daily Nation has decided that it is an economist journal and it is failing terribly. But here we're being told that Yatani yesterday released the budget policy statement, which reveals a huge budget hole, a massive deficit of about 1 trillion that has to be funded through borrowing. So they say that we're pushing the country towards that 9 trillion shilling ceiling. But then they say that in order to fill that revenue shortfall, we're going to have to finance it. And they do it in, the proposal is in 2 parts. About half of it, about 2.8% will come from external borrowing, about 350 million. And then the rest of it will come from domestic borrowing, 4.7% of about 600 million shillings. My issue with this story is how negative it is. It has framed national debt as a negative thing. And I think it's really becoming a thing that sits in the psyche of the Kenyan. We're constantly told, oh, because of how much debt we have, this is how much every household, now owes. You're going to have to dig deeper into your pockets. It's such a negative and quite false narrative. And I think what Kenyans don't understand is that everything we've been told about national debt is false, especially when it comes from the likes of these newspapers that hire journalists who've probably studied like food technology to teach you about economics. So just a few facts to set the record straight. The USA has a national debt of 22 trillion with a T dollars. That means that for every man, woman, and child, they owe, as we would say, $67,000. That's about 70,000 shillings? No, sorry, 70 million shillings.
Each household?
Each household. No, not each household. Every man, woman, and child. The United Kingdom has a national debt of 2 trillion, which means that per household, here in this case, they have a debt of 60,000. South Africa has a national debt of 65 billion. And so I think that one thing we need to understand is that debt levels don't indicate anything about imminent default. It doesn't mean that if we keep getting debt, it means that we're about to give away our port or our roads, right? Because as long as we have secure and efficient financial institutions, as long as we're a functioning economy, we're fine. If anything, what's really interesting, when you have debt, it is proof that the markets have confidence in you as a country, right? That they want to give you money because they know they'll get returns. And the World Bank projected, not only last year, but this year, that our economy would grow. It did last year, and I'm confident that it will this year. And so this is in instances where there were global slowdowns. So I think if we're going to talk about issues of debt, let's look at it with a lens of, accuracy, or at least context.
And truly we can see where this money is going. This money is going to county governments. Every county government today has, I think, a 2-3-star hotel. Over the last 10 years, 21% of our national budget goes there. In addition to all the infrastructure that's happening at in Nairobi and wherever else. The last thing I want to say here on Uhuru Kenyatta, our president is a visionary. And what defines a visionary is a person who sees not through his eyes, but through his beliefs. And all the debt that he is taking on, we are really going to appreciate it once we see the masterpiece that he is creating. He's living beyond his means. We are, as Kenyans, are living beyond our means. But you know what? That is what Christ calls us to do. To live by faith and not by sight.
Exactly.
I think for negativity, let's toss the nation.
Toss it.
That leaves us with the Standard as our winning headline. And onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to judge the cartoons for you. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry, satirical or pessimistic, and effective or just plain lazy? Nation.
In the Daily Nation, we have a football stadium, it looks like, and we have a hand that is the puppet master called Betting Coins, and he is controlling the puppet, which is a man called Match Fixings, and he's flipping a coin. Yes, very boring cartoon. Iga, he knows it. However, we'll give the context, of course. There's a Ugandan man who is supposed to go to court today based on charges for attempting to fix a football match. He was arrested in a hotel trying to bribe the 4 Western Steamer players and the team manager to lose the match. All I can say is that we have this obsession as a country with betting. It's, you know, we're willing to do anything. Yeah, it is a pandemic. We're willing to do anything to make, you know, a quick shilling, turn my 50 into 500. And I think a lot of it is, you know, within that hustler narrative. I don't want to work for my money. I want to scheme for my money. Is that what we want to be known for as a country?
No. So toss it.
And betting is not even a sport that poor people can afford. Betting is a sport for rich people.
Oh my gosh, Jonathan, I'm so happy you said that. There was, in the United States, they have an issue with gambling because for them, the distinction is it a skill or is it pure luck? And they said gambling is luck. It has nothing to do with skill at all. So you can't even say I'm a professional gambler. You're a thief.
I think we've understood the passion with which you hold this. Let's go to the Standard, where we have a caricature of former US President Donald Trump running away from angry Americans who are filing various suits against him. These include My State versus Trump, Georgia State versus Trump, sexual misconduct, criminal conduct charges. Well, the Supreme Court on Monday ended 2 lawsuits that had accused him of violating the Constitution's emolument clauses by profiting from his hotels. So I'll give you a context a little bit. Emolument clauses prevent a sitting president from receiving money from a prince, a king, or a foreign state unless the Congress consents. So what other presidents with money have done is that they've created a blind trust that continues their businesses while they hold public office until they get out of office. Donald Trump said, none of that. I want my money to come to me. And these guys filed these suits, but the Supreme Court said that the case is moot because he's no longer the president, so he can keep earning his money. And they gave nothing to say about it. They didn't give a dissent, nothing. So in essence, maybe that's what's going to happen to those other cases.
He's a lucky guy, isn't he? He keeps getting away with things.
Put it in the parking bay. Star.
Okay, so in the Star we have a caricature here of Raila Odinga in a boxing match with William Ruto. But in this pair of shorts here, titled Development Record, you've also got Uhuru Kenyatta right next to him. And so Raila seems to have attempted to take a jab at Ruto, but then by mistake ended up hitting Uhuru Kenyatta. And so he says, oops, sorry, brother. And the context here is the exchange of words that Raila Odinga has been having with William Ruto. Ruto said that the handshake has derailed the development agenda of the Jubilee government. But Raila said in turn, I think it was yesterday, that it is Ruto who is derailing the party and the government because of his stance against Uhuru Kenyatta and so on. And so basically here saying that Uhuru is becoming collateral damage.
Yeah, unfortunately. Beef. Yeah.
What do we say about those 2 cartoons? Is it Trump versus Raila?
Oh, it's not even a question. I think the Star.
It's not.
The Star wins it. I think the Donald Trump one is good, but it's okay.
Toss the Standard. The Star gives us our winning cartoon. Now for our final thought. But before we get there, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now, our final thought. This week is inspired by some of the most famous betrayals in history. And we kick off the week with the betrayal of Jesus by Judas. So Judas Iscariot is famous for being one of the 12 disciples of Jesus, and the very one who betrayed him in exchange for money. And this we know, this action led to the crucifixion and death of Jesus. So throughout the Gospels, Jesus repeatedly predicted that he would be betrayed. And according to the Gospel of John, Jesus informed his disciples during the Last Supper that one of them would betray him. When they asked who it would be, Jesus said, "It is the one whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." And then he dipped it in the bread in the dish and he handed it to Judas. And after Judas received it, the Bible tells us Satan entered into him. Judas then went to the priests of the temple, the religious authorities at the time, and he offered to betray Jesus in exchange for money. 30 pieces of silver were told in Matthew.
Yeah.
So the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke all specify that Judas pointed out who Jesus was by kissing him when the crowd approached. And then the crowd took Jesus to Pontius Pilate, and he was the Roman governor. And Jesus was subsequently crucified and he died. And of course, we don't forget at the end of the story, Judas then hangs himself.
Yeah.
What I find most interesting is that the Bible offers very few details about Judas's background. So we know that his name is the Greek version, the Greek and Hebrew version of Judah, which roughly means praise or let God be praised. However, the origin of his surname, Iscariot, is not as clear. It's widely held that his name originated from the Greek, meaning man from Kerioth, a city in Palestine. And thus, a case for his name would be similar to calling somebody like Omondi from Kisumu or Cheptor the Kalenjin. But Judas's surname might also have been evidence that he was from the southern part of the country, meaning that maybe he was also a bit of an insider. These are just, hypotheses. However, Judas isn't mentioned nearly as much as Peter, James, or John, but the Bible does record that he was the treasurer for the disciples. However, the Bible also reveals that Judas used this position for his own personal gain. John 12:6 states, "He was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it." And so one of the last interactions we witness of Judas is when Mary took a large quantity of expensive perfume, poured it over Jesus' feet, and wiped his feet with her hair as an act of worship. So Judas objects and he says, "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was a year's worth of wages." And even though we see his intentions might be pure, we're told later, he did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He fully intended to skim those funds from the money bag and use it for himself. And the response that Jesus gives is to leave Mary alone. And so maybe we can see this as a tipping point for Judas. After recounting this story, immediately we see this scene of Judas, going and saying, "This is Jesus, this is the man who you should kill." And so the Bible doesn't state why Judas did what he did. But I think it's worth noting that it wasn't really worth it in the end, was it? Because he ends up hanging himself. And I think Jonathan has an interesting quote about the consequences of suicide, if you could say that.
Yes.
I think I'll go a little bit into the prophecy that led to the betrayal. And I'll go to the Old Testament, and there's a book called Zechariah. And in the book of Zechariah, prophecy is recorded in Zechariah chapter 11, verses 12 and 13. I'll read it out. It says, "And I said unto them, If you think good, give me my hire, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my hire 30 pieces of silver. And Jehovah said unto me, Cast it unto the potter, the goodly price that I was priced at by them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them unto the potter in the house of Jehovah." Many people look at this verse, theologically speaking, as the prophecy of the betrayal by Judas. And it foretells or predicts, according to me, 4 things. The first is it specifies the metallic composition of the money that was used to betray him. Silver, very, very specific. And it also tells of the amount or the price of the betrayal, which was 30 pieces, which is what Judas did get. And it also tells an action, that it would be cast or thrown in the house of Jehovah. And when Judas had regretted what he'd done, when it had really dawned on him that he had sold innocent blood, he came back to the chief priests and he said, "Take back this money." And they said, "We don't know what to do with it." So he threw it at them. In fact, Matthew says that he cast the pieces of silver in the temple, which is in the house of Jehovah. And the final thing that it says is that it states that the final destination of the money, whoever would have it in the end, was the potter. Interestingly as well, in the book of Matthew, they say that the chief priests, once Judas had thrown the money and hung himself, they said, "We can't put this money back in the treasury. I mean, it's tainted with blood, with the blood of Judas and Jesus. So what do we do with it?" So they conferred amongst themselves and they decided to buy a piece of land. In fact, it says they purchased a potter's field, which would serve as a burial place for strangers. I think it's very apt that that verse just laid out that process in that way. Anyway, what that verse doesn't say is who would do it.
Yes.
And I think this begs a very difficult question that needs asking. Was Judas predestined to do this sin? I know a lot of people would shiver about that. And I think that these are hard biblical questions that need to be answered. And personally, I don't think that predetermination is consistent with who God is and his character. And I will get a little preachy here. I think that choice is an essential part of being a believer in God, and that salvation is freely offered to you, but you have to choose to accept it and to believe. So that's why you have John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes should not perish but have everlasting life. And I think that that whosoever included Judas. And if he didn't betray Jesus, because he could have chosen not to, somebody else would have.
Absolutely. So I'd like to examine the psychology of Judas Iscariot in the context of the book The Four Tendencies by the American author Gretchen Rubin, who clusters our personalities into what she calls the four tendencies. The four tendencies are all about how we as human beings with different personalities respond to two kinds of expectations that we confront every day. Those are the outer expectations that come from work and society, and the inner expectations that we set for ourselves. So the first, very quickly, of the four tendencies are what you call the upholders. These are people who excel at meeting both inner and outer expectations. Upholders are generally very reliable and productive people. Judas, I don't think, was an upholder, but I do believe some in Jesus' court of 12 could have been upholders.
I'd say John, the apostle that he loved.
Absolutely. So upholders. Number two, obligers. These are the largest of the four groups in society. These are people who excel at meeting outside expectations, but who struggle with meeting their own expectations. Obligers struggle to generate self-motivation and drive to meet their own expectations, but they really excel at meeting those of others. Then you've got the questioners. The questioners meet inner expectations but are resistant to meeting the needs of others. So they put self first always. So questioners are likely to ask you a question such as, I'm willing to help out, but you have to convince me why it's worth my time.
Wow.
And I'm sure if we study the disciples, I'm sure there's one or two who said, Jesus, I'm willing to follow you, but you got to tell me why it's worth my time. Now, those are the questioners. And maybe Judas is a questioner. We don't know.
I think the bulk of them were, one of the questions that I think they asked Jesus was, who is the greatest in your kingdom? And each of them was like angling for that prize.
Absolutely. And then you've got the rebels. And I think this is squarely where Judas fit in addition perhaps to being a questioner. The rebels push against both inner and outer expectations. And the rebels' motto, if there could be one, is, you can't make me and neither can I. So there's that constant struggle for these expectations. And so they resist meeting those outside ones as well as their own. And they're all about individuality. Now, they're the least in terms of the global population of the four tendencies. And so I want to hypothesize that Jesus recruited his disciples with this framework in mind. All these people have merits, demerits as well, their personalities. Some of them, like questioners, will help advance society because they always ask, why can't we do it a different way? But I want to say, in regard to Judas in particular, what are we told about him? We are told that Judas Iscariot was a zealot. He was an enthusiast. He was a fundamentalist. He was a terrorist to the Roman Empire, but a freedom fighter to the community of Jews who were at that time a colony of the Roman Empire in the land of Palestine. But we're also told that his name, his last name, Iscariot, is derived, this is a theory, is derived from the Latin word Sicarius or Sicari, which means an assassin. And the Sicari, we're told, were the most radical Jewish group, some of whom were known as terrorists. And so it doesn't come as a surprise that he sold out Jesus.
He lived up to his name.
He lived up to that name. And, you know, many of us think that Jesus recruited saints. Jesus recruited people who were perfect. But Jesus recruited opportunists. You know, these are people who were thinking really about themselves, their own visions, and what have you. And people who at that time wanted freedom and liberation for the Jewish nation, for this nation of Palestine. And maybe he sold out Jesus, and this is a theory out there, because he was a little bit frustrated at Jesus's pace in terms of, you know, bringing the revolution, the kingdom. You know, it's not coming, so we've got to catalyze. It's coming. But the lesson, I think, finally is this. Don't apply a permanent solution to a temporary problem. That's the quote you were talking about, 2J.
Oh, yes.
Judas Iscariot and Simon Peter both betrayed Jesus Christ in different ways. You know, Peter denied and disowned Jesus 3 times. And, you know, this is a man who had been in the trenches with Jesus Christ and vowed and told him I loved him. Judas, on the other hand, you know, sold him out to the Pharisees, gave him away. We're told Peter went and wept bitterly, but Judas went and hanged himself. I think the point there is, you know, no matter how grave your sins are, you can be redeemed.
I do agree with that. Today we had a winning headline from The Standard and a winning cartoon from The Star. You can find us on your TV screens. We are on Pan, Free to Air, GoTV and Star Times. And I'll leave you with a quote by Malcolm X on betrayal. He says, "To me, the thing that is worse than death is betrayal. You see, I could conceive death, but I could not conceive betrayal." Have a great weekend.